air conditioning on this 2000 Prius C. If you remember this from my last video last week, this is Prius C I did a recovery on, and now it's time to do a recharge. So I'm somewhat going to take you through some of the procedures. As usual, I usually leave many procedures and little bits of information out. Sometimes I include one bit of information that wasn't in another video, another time I'll leave something else out. Today, something I haven't gone over a while, so we're going to connect up. And as you can see, when I did my recovery, you could see my dye. I always have dye on the inside. Anytime I hook up, you'll always see evidence of my dye, UV dye. So a little nylog, it could be nylog blue, nylog red, whatever. You want to protect these O-ring seals that are inside here, and sticking them on dry fittings is not always a good thing. Multiple times over a dry fitting, put little scratches and scars and cuts on your O-ring, so you don't want to do that. So every several applications to keep them well lubed, other than oil. This is refrigerant oil, but think of 2000 viscosity refrigerant oil. That's all it is. So as you can see, they come out right there like a booger snot. There you go. So we're just going to come down here, and we just went around a little bit, and if you look, that is 10 times more nylog than you actually need. All right, that's how that stuff works. So I'll do the same thing for the high side. Let's see if I can get a good close-up. Let me see if let's spend a little time here. I'll focus for you, and I'll actually get it right up there. See that little bit? Right on that little ridge, that's where your O-ring is going to seal on. Your O-ring for your gauges only seal right on that little flat spot. That little tiny bit, that is all you need. That is more than enough. So that little surface area, that little flat spot is where your O-ring is going to seat. It's not how tight you get it, it's how clean you get it, and how well positioned you are, and how well your O-ring is in good condition. So then we'll get our fitting here, go over for you guys who are really new and have no experience. You pull up, push down, and let go, and it's well in place. Same goes for the other one. If I can get in there, I go on top of it, I get my fingers and I actually pull up. You see that little thing pull up right there? Pull up. And holding my phone and doing this at the same time is not going over very well. Up, up. And you feel it click down. There we go. Nope, I didn't get it. There we go. I went down. This little ridge went down. Okay, so now I have not screwed. See how it says open and close and it has the little arrows on there? I did not. When you screw down clockwise, you'll depress the cores or the Schrader valves, whatever you want to call them. You'll depress them, it'll open up to the system. So if you remember when I did the recovery from the last video, I recovered the refrigerant all the way down to the micron level. Not just inches of mercury, but actually into the microns, completely recovered out. Then they put on and they sealed up the ends. They swapped out a new condenser. This is brand new from Toyota. So it has a new drier desiccant material inside. So this was sealed from the factory, charged with nitrogen. So we have a clean, dry system. On the condenser, a new dry receiver, and there's a drier desiccant material inside there, a big sock that goes all the way from the bottom all the way to the top. And when I finished the recovery, I put dry nitrogen in the system, positive a few psi, so when they opened it up, instead of drawing moist air to contaminate the ester oil for the high voltage 3-phase electric compressor, it had a positive pressure. So when they pulled out the old condenser and put on the new, moist air would not go inside. Okay, then from that point on, now that we have these on, we have the vacuum pumps hooked up. You can see we're 0. So we're 0 in the manifold. I have the vacuum pumps blocked off right now. You can see these fittings, or these valves, are open to the high and the low side. but we have not depressed into the system by screwing clockwise into the system. So every time you want to prove your gauges have the capability of going down without leaks every time, because it just takes that one time to mess your job up. I already have all the field piece wireless probes hooked up and the testos. As you can see, our fresh air in all our different ports all the way back there. So I'm taking temperature of all 4 ports. Last thing you want is a customer coming back saying one port is blowing warm, and you have actual documentation live Bluetooth recorded on a recording that goes with the customer's invoice. So now I'm going to open up the vacuum to the gauges only, but not to the system, because I want to prove I have no leaks and I'm capable of going into a deep vacuum. So let's open up the vacuum. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Open, open. So right now we just opened up to the system itself, and as you can see, we're already at 300 microns. We're at 300 microns at this point where the sensor is, and in these hoses, because these hoses are not open to the system. So I just proved, at least with my pumps running, my gauge can go to this level. So there's no reason once I open to a system I shouldn't be able to hit at least 500 microns if I have a clean dry system. If I still have refrigerant trapped into oil, if I had moisture trapped into oil, you're not going to hit 500 microns. It's not going to happen. You're not going to hold. So we have a clean dry system up to this part, right up to the ends of these fans. Now I'm going to open the service valves and depress the cores, and you're going to see the microns jump up because we have nitrogen in the system. We had a system that was backfilled with nitrogen after I did a recovery. We had a brand new condenser that was shipped with nitrogen on it, with rubber plugs on it. It was installed. So let's see how much we lose as soon as I open up the system. So here I go. I'm going to open this up and you'll watch it jump. As soon as you see that jump, you know I just opened up the bar. There we go. That was the low side. That was the high side. So now both of these are depressed and wide open. And as you can see, count the seconds on the clock to see how, there we go. We're already going into the micron range right now. This is how fast your system can go down if you're clean and dry. Dry is very important. Having no refrigerant in the side system, because you're fighting refrigerant blowing out and exploding out of the oil. And if you remember, when I did the recovery, my recovery unit took it all the way down to 700 or 800 microns. So I was already fairly, what can you say? I degassed the majority of the oil. So now it has little work to do now when I'm pulling my initial vacuum. And if you count and keep track of how many seconds it takes for this to go down, but I am reading the micron level right here. If I went and stuck a micron gauge somewhere back here in the line, say back at the expansion valve, even though this says 600 right here, it might be saying 1100 back there, because you have the restriction, a little bit of restriction of the ports. But one thing HVAC guys from commercial refrigeration and residential HVAC don't understand. These are not normal valve cores that cause a lot of restriction. The size of these valve cores, their body, their diameter, the circumference of the valve that get this pressed and open, instead of that little tiny taper core with the little surround opening, these things have like 8 times the amount of surface area. Kind of like the difference between the field piece valve cores and the stem and the seal and the opening inside here and that big sealing surface area, and the testo. The testo has this little tiny valve plate, the little sealing Teflon core, nylon Teflon core for sealing and letting airflow across it, where the field piece has a very large diameter circumference. And it's not one for one. If you're, let me just use inches. If you're 1 inch and you go to 2 inch, you must double. No, the circumference area, when you do the pi and you do the math thing, is much larger. So I won't get, let's not even get into math. But there you go. We are a few minutes in from when I opened the valves to the system, and we're already down into below the 500 at this point. And now I'll wait, and I'll come back and do the charge video. I need to put my phone down so I connect up. I'm gonna go do some paperwork, finish out this invoice. And as you guys know, I use QuickBooks, and if you're just a one-man show or a very small company, QuickBooks might be the way for you to go. And if you're not in business yet but you think you want to go into business, start your personal life out with QuickBooks so you can get used to using it before opening a business. And if you do side work for friends, families, your neighbors, maybe inside your church or a mosque or whatever, for people around you in your local vicinity, you do side work, get a subscription to QuickBooks. Teach yourself simple, basic bookkeeping, and do your invoicing and your bills just like you owned a legitimate business. To start yourself in bookkeeping before you decide to go into business. Don't go into a business not knowing paperwork and bookkeeping and taxes. This is where many people make mistakes. So start yourself on some sort of platform, and I use QuickBooks just because I've been using it for 20 some years as your jump off point. And then when you go into business, if you've already been using it for a year or two, opening a business will be so much easier than having the pressures of dealing with your company, your customers, problems and everything like that. On top of that, learning bookkeeping on the fly the day you open up business. This is where a lot of businesses collapse, especially if you're just a one-man show and you're starting out. So I'll catch you guys when I come back, and we'll charge this guy up and see where we're at.